Hello. Think I'm live? Yes, I am. It's like I question myself every single time, like whether I'm live, even though there's a huge red button in the corner saying live, Anna. Anyway, we've had a few technical difficulties, but we're all behind scenes, all eager to go. So like normal, if you have never seen one of our shows before, or you are a 10th time listener, I want to say, I think it's 10 broadcasts we've done, then please give us a shout out in the comments on the Facebook or YouTube, and I'll try and shout out you. But this week, it's Carers Week. So as we celebrate young people every single week, we should be celebrating young people, whoever they are, whatever responsibilities they have. So we thought it's perfect to get our very own resident shout out newsletter editor. She's great on Twitter. We've got a fab young person called Alicia. I can see her laughing in the little thing. She loves it. And interviewing Mark Russell, who some of you may have heard of. He's kind of like the chief executive of, this charity called the Children's Society, which I'm very proud to work at. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our very special guest. And for everybody who is tired of seeing my face, I'm not going to be on the stream. Yay! Anyway, so I will introduce Mark and Alicia. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you both?
I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm actually really excited. I can actually see it from behind scenes what everyone else sees, really. So I'm really excited. What about you, Mark?
I'm really glad to be here. Alicia is an expert interviewing me. She's about the third time, so I'm delighted to be here with her.
Perfect. Yeah, it'll be a bit different, I think. I think one of the main reasons I get everybody commenting going, we want to hear more about young people, and I'm not young anymore. I'm over the threshold at the grand old age of 26.
It's all right, Mark. You're already old. Like, you can accept the fact you're old.
Yeah. About to get older. I'm like older again.
Wow. I think we've got a great amount of people watching, and people are loving it already. Ruth is saying, hello all, shout out to our amazing Include Young Carers team. Nikki's saying, hope everyone's okay. Everyone's loving it already. So I will leave you guys alone, and just if you need me, I'm in the background, but you guys do not need me. Oh, we've got someone from Include team. She's so excited. Luella?
Hi, Luella.
Okay. Well, without further ado, over to you, Alicia.
Well, apparently, you've got to do the 60-second challenge because Dave did it. So you've got to do it. I'm just getting my little watch here. 14.
Oh my gosh, I've got to reach 14 in a minute. All right, okay.
Yeah. You ready? Favorite dish?
Spaghetti bolognese.
Thick chips or thin chips?
Thick.
What do you order at fish and chips?
Fish, chips, haddock and fries.
Your favorite film?
Shawshank Redemption.
Call or text?
Text.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
Hot weather or cold weather?
Hot.
Books or movies?
Books.
Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
What's the best age?
45, obviously.
Chinese or Italian?
Italian.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Rural or urban?
Rural.
Cake or pie?
Pie.
Favorite childhood TV show?
Blue Peter.
Favorite board game?
Cluedo.
Your favorite holiday?
United States to New York.
You're out of time. That was, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Keep
16,
going.
16 or 17. I'm not sure. But you got more than Dave. That's
I did get more than
what
Dave.
counts.
Let's go
So,
17. Okay, let's compromise on 17.
congratulations on that one. So
you.
obviously this week is Carers Week, with
Yeah.
the theme being making carers more visible and giving giving carers the voice to be heard. So obviously I've got some questions for you. Let me get them up. We love technology.
We do. And carers is really important and absolutely important. I know it's really something you're really passionate about, Alicia, too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
before you ask me my question, tell me why you're passionate about this.
I'm very passionate about Carers Week due to being a young carer myself. I think it's really important that as someone who stereotypically isn't heard in conversations, that you should be able to get your voice heard. And as a young person who a lot of the time has been told, because you're too young or because you're not wise enough to know what should be right and wrong, that you shouldn't be involved in that sort of conversation. And I've always had the belief that if I have an opinion, I should be able to say it. Like, I don't see why young people shouldn't be able to sit at the table if they can watch the table.
Well said. Well said. I completely agree with you. And that's why it's really amazing for me to be here today with you, because I know what an amazing advocate you are for young carers and how passionate you are about this. And I have the privilege of following you on Twitter and seeing that passion, not just in Carers Week, but in all the other 51 weeks of the year as well. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about these really important issues and how we can all make a better difference to supporting young carers in our society. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's always great having a chat with you, Mark. We love. It's become a thing now where I just end up interviewing you. So it's always a good one. So I've got a quick question. Well, it's not really quick. It's quite an important one. How do you intend to make young carers more visible? Obviously, with the theme being about getting carers visible, how do you kind of intend to make that happen?
Well, I hope a little bit of that is happening right now. I hope a little bit of that happening right now, in that we're having this conversation in public with an audience, talking about these important things. I hope that's a really important part of that. But actually, my view is that all too often young carers fall between the cracks in the system and are often forgotten and are often left behind. I have the privilege of sitting on a call right the way through this COVID crisis with government every single week, with senior people from lots of different government departments. And every week I ask the question, what's this mean for young carers? And it's sort of, everyone sort of goes, oh, here he goes again, he's asking it again. And I will continue to ask that question because it's really important. And one of the biggest challenges, Alicia, and you know this more than I do, is that we don't actually know how many young carers there are. We think we know. I mean, the survey, the last census, like 10 years ago, so it was like 170,000 or something, but we know it's way more than that. And I know that from talking to my colleague Helen, who is absolutely passionate about advocating for young carers, that she thinks there's around 800,000 young people who are young carers in this country. We know that nearly a third of those young carers at some point miss school. We know that many of those young carers are having to do things that really adults should be doing, whether that's doing the grocery shopping, whether that's trying to balance the books and the finances, whether that's doing the cooking or the ironing or the cleaning, or trying to work out how to navigate the benefit system. These are things that adults normally do, and I know there are too many young people doing this day in, day out. So I am determined that whatever voice I've got, whatever voice the Children's Society has got, we will use that voice to, first of all, say thank you to those young carers for being amazing, but then secondly, work out how to support them better, and thirdly, work out how to change the system so that their lives are better going forward. And so that's why this week is so important, because it shines a light on young carers and allows us to talk about the issues they're facing and how we can all make a difference to making things better.
I completely agree. And I think even with the number of young carers, because of the pandemic we're in, I definitely think there was a thing on the BBC the other day about how that they think there's a new generation of young carers that have just come from the pandemic alone. I think if you add them young people to the number of already young carers, the number of actual young carers is probably a lot bigger than even estimates say. So
absolutely, and that's why, I mean, one of the things that we do as an organisation, which and I'm really passionate about, is we do the Young Carers Festival every single year. And this year would have been, like, in 2 weeks' time, the 21st Young Carers Festival. And I'm gutted because of COVID, that for obvious reasons it wouldn't be safe to do Young Carers Festival this year, and we're not having it. And so I'm really sorry, because that's a really important point in young carers' lives in the year, to give them time to come together, to share stories, to be encouraged by each other, to know that they're not on their own. And it allows us as well as an organisation to listen to young carers, and because there's like 1,500 of them in one place. So I'm really sad Young Carers Festival isn't happening this year, because I think that's a really important part. But you know what? We're going to come back and do an even bigger 21st next year, and it'll be the best ever.
I completely agree. I think next year's Young Carers Festival is going to be a good one.
Isn't it?
Something I also want to add is, obviously, with this week being Carers Week, the Carers Trust are running something called a Carers Week Pledge. And as you yourself are very passionate about talking about it, about talking about young carers and obviously supporting them with your organisation that you represent, it would be amazing, I have to add, if you would write up a pledge or send us your pledge and we'll get it up for you, about how you're going to action helping young carers moving forward, as well as in the pandemic as well. So if you could do that, that'd be amazing.
I'll absolutely do that. I'll absolutely, with great pride, add my name to that. Complete pride.
Thank you. Another question.
Send me the link afterwards so I know where to send it to, but I will absolutely do that. Because I'm passionate about this, Alicia. We've talked about this before. We don't have to be on a camera in front of other people to talk about this. We've talked about this before, and I'm really passionate. And I think that there is a generation of young people who, quite frankly, are heroes. And I remember sitting next to one young person at the Young Carers Festival who told me that the Young Carers Festival allowed her to be 15 for 3 days. Now, I'm really proud to lead an organisation that allows that young person to be 15 for 3 days. But you know what? I'm going to work really hard, and the Children's Society is going to work really hard that the other 362 days that young person can be 15.
I mean, I myself, my life has changed since going to the Young Carers Festival. I think there's so many other young carers out there who can say the same, that the Young Carers Festival has honestly made them think about life, and it's kind of changed the way they think, and it's just given them something to be proud of.
Well, we're going to do a cracking one next year.
I'm excited, definitely. So obviously, going back to the pandemic, because can't avoid it, I'm afraid. How do you think the pandemic will affect young carers when we come out of lockdown? Obviously, we are being in a phase exit of the lockdown even. That might help. How do you kind of think that's going to affect young carers, especially those from immune compromised backgrounds?
Do you know, Alicia, the pandemic is horrendous. I think it's like nothing any of us have ever experienced in our lives. It's the biggest crisis that this country has faced in a generation. And every one of us has been impacted by that. But actually, young people who come from positions where they're battling with so many other complexities in their lives, it has made an even bigger impact on them. And whether that's young people living in poor housing, or young people living in poverty, or young people battling mental health issues, or young people facing exploitation or neglect or abuse, wherever those complexities were before COVID made those worse. And I think that is true for many young carers, and that's what the young carers have been telling us. That's what I've been following various people on Twitter who've been talking about this. Is that that COVID has made their lives more difficult. And I think for many young carers, school was a place of respite. I know there were challenges with school and homework and all. I absolutely understand that, and not being able to get assignments done because you were too busy with your caring responsibilities. But I know that for many young carers, school was a respite, and that respite hasn't been there. And so therefore it has been even more intense, the experience of being a young carer through this crisis. And I'm trying to work out, and I don't even quite know the answer to the question. How do we help those young carers who've been under so much strain and pressure to integrate back into the education system whenever schools open, to get the support that they need, to make sure that they're in good health, particularly, as you say, those who perhaps have got compromised immune systems or whatever, and to make sure that we help them process whatever is experienced in their lives, whatever's going on in their lives in this complex time. And those are really massive questions. And I know government are trying to work out the answers to those. And we're doing our best to help government think through those questions, because they're huge, absolutely huge. And I fear that all of the strides we've made with young people, particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds, with education over the last decade, we've made real progress. I'm really scared that those hard-earned wins in young people's education are going to be lost. The fact that there's nearly 6 months of these young people's lives that they haven't been in school. And if you come from a wealthy background and everything's fine, and you've got a nice computer and you've got good Wi-Fi, you probably have been able to continue your education. But if you're in an environment where you haven't got the right digital kit, where the Wi-Fi doesn't work, where you don't have Wi-Fi, where your parents have had to go out to work because they're key workers or whatever it is, you're living in poor, cramped housing, you're being a young carer and having to 24/7 round the clock care for someone in the family, there's going to be a huge whacking great hole in those young people's educational attainment. And we as a society have got to take responsibility for that and work out how best to respond to it. And that may be a series of things we do over the summer. It may have to be accelerated learning. It may, we're still working out the answers to that. If anyone watching this has any ideas, drop me a line and I'll happily take those with me to my next government call, because these are the kinds of questions we've never had to answer as a society before, but answer them we must.
I completely agree. As someone who's got exams next summer, I think the whole concept that I haven't been in learning for I don't know how many months at this point, and I don't know how many months it will be, but I know from speaking to loads of different young people, those from disadvantaged backgrounds are really struggling with the online learning, and it's kind of what's going to be done when we go back, especially for those who are young carers, because they're going to miss more and more time, and it's going to become a lot more of a gap, which is what I'm going to lead on to now. You're probably going to tell me that you don't know the answer and you'd love to hear my answer, but what do you think can be done to bridge the gap in education between young carers and their peers, especially for those who won't be going anytime soon? But there was always a gap originally. Statistics show that there's always a gap between young carers and their peers within education grades, but kind of what do you think can be done to try and prevent it getting worse?
That's a really tough question, and government don't know the answer to that question either. For what it's worth, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to this question. I think part of the challenge. I used to be a youth worker before I got a fancy title as a chief exec, and part of the challenges are that some people think that young people, it's the same solution required for every young person's issue. And it's not. Young people are individuals, and we need individual solutions frequently. So I suppose I would want to start with listening to young carers as we come out of this pandemic to find out where the gaps have been in their education during this period. And then the schools need to have a wraparound answer to that, and a wraparound answer for every single young person. And it may look different. Some young people may need some extra things at weekends or in the summer, or accelerated learning, or we may have to look at more radical suggestions like what curriculums look like for the year ahead. So there isn't an easy answer for how you make up 6 months of lost education in a young person's life, but we have to do our level best as a society to try and work out how. Otherwise, Alicia, there should be a generation of young people whose lives will be changed forever by this pandemic in terms of their education, and that can't be right. And so one of the things we've been pushing really hard on is for government to deliver on its promise to get digital equipment to young people who don't have digital equipment. And I know they're trying really hard, but too many of those young people haven't yet got that IT kit, and we have to keep pushing that gets out there. But I really worried about so many of our particularly our young carers, for whom there is now going to be a huge gap in their educational attainment, and that isn't fair. And actually, truth be, and this, Alicia, is that young carers don't get the fairest start in life anyway. And we've got to try and change that. But leaving COVID to one side, young carers do not get the fairest start in life, and we've got to level that playing field up. So I don't know all the answers to that question. If you've any you want to tell me, I'd love to hear them. If anyone watching has any answers that they want to tell me, I'd love to hear them. But because we want to make sure we're using this organization's voice to find the right solutions to support young people, particularly young carers, at this tough time.
I mean, it's definitely, I don't think it's going to be an overnight fix. I think it's definitely going to take time to get a plan together that works. And obviously it's not going to work for everyone because everyone's situation is different. But I think the fact that not every young person has the ability to even have the facilities for remote learning just shows that even if someone like a young carer or someone else who's in a situation of not exploitation, but in a similar like situation is having to do so much extra, then not being able to have the time to try and get resources together and not having the facilities to go to a library and stuff like that to get work done, it is going to be hard. And I think for me especially, I found talking to other young carers that teachers were always harsh in the first place for like with education, and they kind of didn't understand young carers. And obviously remote learning, you just get sent a load of work and they're like, there you go, have it. And a lot of young carers are struggling to juggle the caring responsibilities and the added caring responsibilities of a pandemic, and obviously trying to work out how to do remote learning. And I think it's definitely going to be an interesting one to see how it plans out.
There's just too much to juggle for a young carer, right? Far too much. And actually, I think I saw on the BBC the other day that they asked young carers how they were feeling at the moment. And I think, if I remember correctly, 1/3 of those who responded said that their physical health was, I think, just okay. Wasn't good, it wasn't very good or excellent, it was just okay. And I think about 1/4, maybe even more, maybe 1/3 of those young carers said that they were struggling with their mental health. And so that's huge, absolutely huge. One of the things that the Children's Society has been arguing for is that when children return to school, young people return to school, is that actually there should be a well-being check for every single young person. That a teacher or a pastoral person or a counsellor should sit down with every single child as they return to school. Because we don't know what's happened to those young people in those months. We don't know what they've experienced. We don't know who of them have had bereavement or grief or pain or neglect or whose mental health has suffered. And we have got to take responsibility as a society for our young people's mental health. And young carers, my fear always for young carers, and particularly during COVID, has been it's just relentless pressure on them. And actually, perhaps we've been focusing quite a lot on education, and of course education is important, but actually what's even more important than education is your health, and your emotional health, your physical health, your mental health. And so I really want to encourage young carers, anyone who's watching this, try and find some space in your lives just for you. Just for you, whether that's you pick up a new hobby or do art or craft or go for a walk. Or I read on one of our Children's Society young carers blog that somebody bought an oil diffuser to have nice wafting smells around their room, and or closing their eyes and just putting music on and listening to that. Whatever it is, even taking a break from social media. Education is massively important, but actually my biggest concern for young carers right now is their physical, their emotional, and their mental health. And so it's helping young carers have permission to look after themselves. And that's what I really, really wanted to say on this call today to you and to all the other young carers, is to make sure you're looking after yourselves. It's so important.
It's definitely important, because a lot of the time young carers do forget to look after themselves because they're too busy looking after whoever they care for. And then obviously a lot of the time you'll be asked how the person you care for is doing and not yourself. So a lot of the time you just forget, and it does become something not natural essentially. And I think especially saying that you should need, especially we're in a global pandemic, you need to take some time for yourself. Like, it's going to be stressful, but definitely take some time for yourself.
Absolutely.
Another question I had is, obviously I'm very lucky that I've had the platform with the Children's Society and they've given me so many opportunities. But how do you think the Children's Society can help more young carers speak out about issues that matter to them?
Well, Alicia, I think we're the lucky ones that you've chosen to be part of our platform, quite frankly. I think you're a superstar, and I think that. I think you're amazing. You're inspirational. You are eloquent, passionate, and committed. and I learn something every time I talk to you. So listen, by all means, I'm glad you think you're fortunate that we've allowed you part of our platform, but we, on the other hand, see it as a huge privilege that you're part of our organization. And actually, I want to continue to have these conversations, not just when we're on a camera, but because I need to learn from you about how the organization can do more. So I think what we need to do is continue to challenge government around the support for young carers, continue to challenge government as they're thinking about schools reopening, asking this question continually: what does this mean for young carers? What does this mean for young carers? What does this mean for young carers? And continue to ask that question. I will continue to be the annoying person in those meetings who continues to ask those questions. It means that we are continuing to look at the support structure for young carers, and quite frankly, young carers need a better deal. And for us to work out what that better deal is, we need the voices of young carers, the voices of their families, and that's what our Include program, as you know, is so passionate about. It's about hearing the voices of young carers and then acting on what those young carers are telling us. So in some respects, I absolutely know why you've asked me the question, but I kind of want to, you know what I'm going to do now, don't you? What am I going to do?
You're going to ask me the question back.
I'm going to do the question. So what are the changes that we need to do to support young carers?
Well, you know, I've always been passionate about the fact that the Children's Society needs to talk to more young people and engage with more young people. Obviously, the Include service does a great job with what they do. I don't really know. I've always said that you should speak to more young people, but I feel like that's kind of as far as I can really say there, because I think the more you engage with young people, the more likely you're going to find out the problems in the system, and those are the problems that need solving. And obviously, if you don't speak to those young people, those problems won't ever get surfaced. So I definitely think the more young people, the better.
I think that's right. The other one of the challenges we have is that some of the complexities that young carers face, they fall between. I said earlier, young carers often fall between the cracks in the system, but actually, young carers fall between the cracks within the government machine. So there's an element of this is about education. So that's the Department of Education's responsibility. Some of this is about the benefit system, and that's Department of Work and Pensions. And some of this is about health and mental health and physical health, and that's the Department of Health. So one of the challenges is making sure this we're pushing government to have a joined up approach to young carers. Now, I know when we had the then minister, Caroline Dinenage, came to the Young Carers Festival, and I know she's also a bit of a fan of yours, judging by Twitter. Yeah, she does. I know that's one of the things that we put to her was saying that we need a more joined up approach across government to the challenges young carers face. So the Children's Society will keep advocating for that, Alicia, and I as an old guy, as you very helpfully reminded me earlier, need to hear the voices of young people, particularly young carers, and how we do that. So I'm going to need you to keep telling me what I need to do.
Don't you worry, I'm not going to stop tweeting anytime soon. Something else that I wanted to talk to you about was, you've probably seen on Twitter. Most of the people who followed me on Twitter might have seen it. I put on the 26th of April, I put up something saying that children and young people were being denied a voice in the COVID-19 strategy issue thing. What's kind of your view on it, and how do you think it can be actioned?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I agree with you. Let me tell you a little what happened. The day schools closed, back in, was it March? They closed. I was in my local Morrison's. All the supermarkets are available. So my local Morrison's, buying something, and there were about 14 or 15 young people in front of me in the queue, all wearing the same school uniform of the local high school, which is across the road from where I live. And if I was 15 years old and was being told that I had 12 weeks school holiday unscheduled in the middle of the academic year, I might have thought all my Christmases had landed at once. And these children were scared. Nothing in their lives had ever prepared them for what was going on. School closed, shops closing, pubs closing, gyms closing, sports centers closing, parks closing. Nothing in their head. Their brains were short-circuiting. And of course, as an adult, of course, you can't intervene in a conversation. But one of the young people recognized me because he's a neighbor. And he said, Mark, he said, you work for a children's charity, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. What do you think's going to happen? And I said to him, I said, we're going to be okay. We're going to come through this. This country's come through a whole pile of stuff before. We're going to come through it. What we have to do is follow the advice the government give us. We have to do what our teachers and our families tell us, and we have to try and be responsible. Keep our distance from people, and let's get rid of this awful virus that's killing so many people. But we're going to be okay. That's all. I said that we're going to be okay. And their faces changed like that. Somebody had said something in language they understood that reassured them it was going to be okay. Now, those 14 or 15 children in Hampshire, frightened, are a microcosm of hundreds of thousands of children across this country who are scared right now, who don't know what to make of this. And I have appealed to Boris Johnson, I have appealed to the government to speak to young people directly. I think it's absolutely imperative that they do that. It's crucial that they, I was inspired very early on in this crisis by the example of the Norwegian Prime Minister, who held a press conference for children. And so she had this big conference, looked exactly the same as the adult one, with all this government advisors and all of that. But the questions didn't come from the BBC or Laura Kunsberg or Beth Rigby from Sky. The questions didn't come from them. The questions came from Peter, age 9, in a city in Norway, or Alice, it came from a child age 15 or whatever it was. And the Prime Minister proceeded to answer all of those questions in language that children understood. Now, our government could have done that. The Secretary of State for Education could have done that. We could have wheeled out, a pop star perhaps to be part of it, maybe like Stormzy, or we could have had maybe Prince William do it. We could have done that, and we could have shown that we understood that too many children, young people, were frightened right now and needed some sort of reassurance that we're going to be okay. Well, we're 13 weeks into this, and they still haven't done it. And the two broken records on my government call every week, one is your young carers, and the other is when you're going to communicate with young people. Now, I know you highlighted on Twitter, and I raised it with the minister. You saw me do it on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a reply yet, but I raised it to the minister that you tried to ask a question, because the public are now allowed to ask questions at the prime ministerial broadcast at the Downing Street press conference, and you weren't allowed to ask one because you were under 18. And that sends a clear message, unintended, I think, but it sends a message that the government isn't listening to young people. So I will keep appealing to the government to find a way to not only hear the voices of young people, but to act on what they hear. I think that's really important. And the Children's Society is very proud to put our name to a big coalition of charities. The I Will campaign, NSPCC, Bernardo, Action for Children, UNICEF, a whole host of us have said, government, please find a way to communicate to young people in language they understand, listen to what they have to say, take their questions, and give them the reassurance that we as a country will come through this and come out the other end. So I'll keep asking the question, Alicia. I'll keep asking, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, it's very powerful to see something that I started kind of take off completely. And there's so many organizations that have signed up to support it, and so many people in your sort of position with power, supposedly, who can try and get the government to answer, as obviously young people can't. I think it's a bit of a shame that we've had nothing yet, and I think it would have been.
I think it's terrible. I mean, I really do, and I don't understand why it's so hard.
I think it definitely would have showed a powerful message to all the other countries if the UK could have done something similar to Norway has done.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand did something similar as well, Jacinda Ardern. I mean, obviously there's a parallel. Both of those leaders are women, of course, and they are both clearly doing an amazing job. And maybe we need to encourage our government to do the same. So yeah, I agree with you. So I'll keep using my voice, I promise, to ask that question. It's really important.
I mean, I've got another question from me. It's a question I ask you all the time, but I think it's always a really nice one. If you could give a piece of advice to a young person today, as if we're in the global pandemic, what would it be?
I could give about 5 pieces of advice to young people right now and to young carers right now, but I'm going to say, I think what I said the last time you asked me this question, because I think it's still the most important piece of advice I can offer any young person. And that is that inside you is a unique blend of gifts and skills and attributes and passions and compassions, a unique perspective on the world. Inside you is the potential to achieve anything. And it's not to allow yourself to be constrained by either circumstances or difficulties, or constrained by the negative words of other people or the limitations of other people, but instead dare to believe that you have the potential to change the world. When I was a youth worker many, many moons ago, when I was very young and I didn't have any grey hair, there was a young person in my youth group whose father had a job that meant he kept moving house all the time. And so this young person had grown up changing school pretty much nearly every year, really struggled with school, found school really hard and an unhappy place, and exam results weren't great, and kept being told by teachers that he didn't have the potential to do very much. And there was one particular day, there was a sub teacher, like a teacher was sick, so they had a locum teacher in for the day, and this locum teacher asked him to do something interesting, like it was like, write out what your dream is. And so this young person wrote his dream, and it was a dream, to have a house in the country and a stable and a horse and a nice car and a big job and all this. And anyway, the locum went off, and the teacher came back from being sick, and obviously had these pieces of work, and handed his back to him with a 0 on it, and said, "Come back next time with a dream or a hope that you might have a realistic chance of succeeding at." And he asked me what to do. And I said to him, "You do what you think is right." And the following day, he went back into school and he handed the teacher the same piece of work. And he said to her, "Miss, you can keep your mark. I'm keeping my hope." Now, that young person, I'm now much older, is now in his 20s, and he's achieving his dream. He's doing really well. He's not allowed himself to be limited by the words of others who said he couldn't achieve. So that's my biggest piece of advice, Alicia. Inside you is talent, skills, and brilliance and energy. Use it to be the best you can be, to leave your footprint and your fingerprints on this world, and to make it a better place.
It's definitely that. I've heard you say that story before, but I think to anyone who's just heard that now, it is a very powerful story, and it's got such a powerful message behind it. And I think any young person should definitely, there's no dream that's too big. I said that last time. No dream is too big, and you should definitely just go for it. You've got nothing to lose at the end of the day. So don't give up. I also got some. Oh, go on, Mark.
That's absolutely right, because I think one of the biggest, the most awful thing must be to get to maybe 70, 80 years old and think to yourself, "I wished I'd tried that. I wished I'd had a go at that. I wished I'd tried to do that job." I don't think we should do that. I think we should seize opportunity and be the best we can be. And so, Alicia, I have no doubt you're making a colossal difference already. All right, you're making a huge difference. Here you are sitting on a live platform interviewing a chief executive of a large charity. You're playing a major role in being an advocate for young carers. Your voice is being heard. Ministers of the Crown are retweeting you. This is where you hit 20. I have absolute high hopes for what you're going to do with your life. And any way I can add my support, my encouragement, my help to help you achieve that, consider it done.
I mean, thank you. I mean, it's a very surreal thing. When I come off of these calls and I come off Twitter and I see some of the people that retweet things, I do kind of have to pinch myself and think, is this real? Is this really people with so much supposed authority in this country supporting some of the issues I raise and are willing to help get the support in place to have that issue not so much of an issue? It's definitely a bit strange.
You're passionate about it and you speak with experience, and when you mix passion and experience, you have the elixir for change.
Definitely. I've got some additional questions for you from young people. One of the young trustees has asked, how are you using your privilege to help and support disadvantaged young people, especially through the Black Lives Matter?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bilkis, for the question. I'm really proud that we have young people on our board. When I was appointed to this job, I was interviewed by a number of young people. Bilkis was part of that team. I think it's really important that, and I'm really proud that Children's Societies place the voices of young people right at the center of our governance structure. And Bilkis is an amazing advocate for young people, and this is a really important question. And I think what I'd want to say is, before the terrible things happened in America a fortnight ago, before that, there was systemic racism and disadvantage and injustice and prejudice for people from all kinds of different ethnic minorities in the United States and in this country as well. What Black Lives Matter has done, and what the horrific murder of George Floyd has done, is shine a light on the particular racism and the particular prejudice and the particular injustice that the Black community suffer. And it's truly horrendous. And so the first thing that I need to do as a privileged white man is learn more. I will never be able to truly understand because I've never lived that experience, but I need to learn more, educate myself, to listen to the views of my Black friends and my Black colleagues of what this means right now, and then to work out how I can use my voice to turn this round. That silence is being complicit in this, and it's not on. And so I want to say loudly and clearly, the Children's Society is passionately anti-racist. We are passionately anti-discrimination. We desperately are in favor and passionately in favor of everyone, regardless of their background, their ethnicity, their sexuality, their ability, stroke disability, whatever background they come from, gender, whatever the issue is. We are passionate about equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I will use whatever breath I've got to help fight for that in this country. It is unacceptable that if you are a BAME young person, you are more likely to live in poor housing than a white young person. If you're a BAME young person, you're more likely to live in poverty than a white young person. If you're a BAME young person, you're more likely to experience exclusion from school than a white young person. If you're a BAME young person, you're more likely to end up in the criminal justice system than a white young person. And if you're a BAME young person, you're more likely to be unemployed than a white young person. Now, that is not on. You then add onto that the complexity of COVID, where there are twice as many BAME people being infected by this awful virus and dying from this virus. So there is colossal injustice. We're not going to turn that around overnight, but I'm going to say out loud that I am committed to doing whatever I can to making this society fairer and more just and more equal, that everyone has the equal chance to succeed. And I am passionate about that, and I will do whatever I can.
I mean, I think it's such an important issue to so many young people, because it's definitely come out, like, since obviously the whole movement has kind of started, a lot of young people started to speak out about their experience. And I've had friends who've spoke out about systematic racism within schools and the institutionalized racism that is in our public schools nowadays. And I definitely think those with the privilege should be advocating for those young people to get the rights that they deserve and not have to go through some of the experiences they've been through, if not for them, but for the generation coming up through the schools and through the ranks of life. As it shouldn't be acceptable to have some of the incidents and some of the comments that are made towards them just because of the color of their skin.
No, completely awful and truly horrendous. And I think the horrific events in the United States in the last couple of weeks, I mean, none of us could be anything other than, we were watching it unfold on our screens. The George Floyd having, the knee of a police officer against his neck for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. And the man saying, "I can't breathe," and truly horrendous. But actually what we're having to recognize is that actually, to be perfectly honest, this is the first time in my entire life I can ever remember an open discussion about racism in our society. I can't remember it before. And you know what I dare to dream? I dare to dream that in 20 years' time, when we think of George Floyd's memory, we don't think of George Floyd as yet another Black person who died at the hands of police brutality. but we see George Floyd as the catalyst for global change, where racism was confronted head on, and all of us who are white joined the. I was watching George Floyd's funeral yesterday, and one of the civil rights activists from the 1960s, who was a friend of Martin Luther King, said the difference this time is there are white people on these marches. It's not just black people protesting that Black Lives Matters. White people are protesting for this as well. And I promise to be a fellow protester on this until our society is a fairer and more just place.
I completely agree with this. Like, I've personally found that it's quite hard to say something because you don't want to say the wrong thing. I think it's something that a lot of young people have struggled with. But because there is just no words for what happened and why it happened, it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Correct.
And I think it's just so powerful, the fact that one catalyst can erupt such global I wouldn't even say change, because nothing has changed as of yet. Such global kind of, everyone's come together and shown that this issue is important and it needs to change, and things need to be done to ensure that the lives of Black people are improved and that no one has to go through what George Floyd had to go through.
Totally.
I've got one last question for you from a young person. After lockdown, how strong is the funding for the Children's Society going to be?
That's a big question. The reality is, Alicia, that this organisation has taken a huge financial hit in this period of COVID-19. One of our major sources of income is we have an amazing retail network with phenomenal staff who run that and thousands of volunteers. And that retail network generally raises over £1 million a month for our work. You add on to that money is no longer there. We're still having to pay rent on all of those shops, and we're still making sure we ensure all of our staff are being paid. At the same time, we lost a whole pile of things like the London Marathon and fundraising, community events. So the organisation has taken a big hit in our funding. And so we will hope, that said, we've been very fortunate that we've had an emergency appeal that's been running through this. And if anyone would like to contribute, please go to our website. We'd love to have you help us. And that's raising thousands of pounds at the moment to help us fill some of that hole. But what we have to do when we come out the other end of this is make sure we raise even more money to help us make the difference we want to make. But no hiding the fact that there is a significant hole in our finances this year because of COVID-19.
I mean, I know obviously it's a whole kind of sector thing that is become prevalent, because obviously the longer shops were closed for, the longer the likelihood of them reopening is, and obviously you guys need the money to help support some very vulnerable young people, especially when there is nothing at the minute that can be done in person. So it's kind of something that definitely needs to be.
Yeah, completely right. But we're fortunate. We have our trustees have been very prudent over the years. Now they've managed our assets, so we have some reserves in the bank to use. And you have reserves for rainy days. In this right now, it's like a hurricane. So we have those reserves. But it's really important to say that I think at the end of this crisis, there will be three types of charity. Charity one will have gone. And we know from The Guardian today, there's a significant chunk of charities are not going to survive this crisis, and that's disaster. Charity two will be exhausted and tired and will have used all of their money, and their team will be worn out. And charity three will have to be reborn for a different world on the other side. We're not going to return to what we had before. The world is going to be different on the other side. It's going to be a new normal and a new world. And I can tell you, the Children's Society's team, all of us, we're determined, every one of us, from the chief executive to the person who arrived on our staff yesterday, from every one of us, we are determined we're going to be charity three, that we're going to be able to hit the ground running, to continue to support young people, to be there for them, and to make sure they have the support that they need. And as you know from this call, young carers are a critical part of what we want to be doing in the next season of our life.
I mean, I've met so many members of staff at the Children's Society now, and not even so many of them, all of them are so passionate about ensuring young people are supported, especially when things like school aren't able to be that sort of support network, and the fact that we're not going to go back to whatever normal was. We're going to go back to we're not even going to go back to it. We're going to invent it. We're going to find this new way of living, and I think there's going to be a lot of change in the world, and young people are going to need support getting to used to that, because obviously it's going to be a bit of a gap between the old normal and this invention of new. And I think there's going to be so many young people out there who have fallen through the gaps because of the pandemic, and have fallen through all different things due to whatever's going on at home. And the fact that charities need to get back in there as quick as possible, but obviously finances for not all charities are able to be as good as the children's societies might sound. And I think definitely it's something where everyone's going to have to get used to a new way of working or a new way of living. And I think now more than ever, young people need the support.
I couldn't put it better myself. Absolutely spot on what you just said there. And I can tell you, you're right. I work with the most extraordinary people, talented, committed, bright, energetic team. I am proud of every one of them. They have been managing through this crisis with immense commitment, and I'm really moved by all that my colleagues have done in being able to continue to be there for so many young people through this crisis, and the sacrifices that they've made to do that. Yes, the finances are challenging, really challenging, and if anyone watching this is able to help us, we would really value that, and supporting our appeal. But I'm determined, the whole Children's Society team are determined, that we'll continue to do our level best to be there for as many young people, to be that lifeline, to enable them to be supported, and also, as this we've been talking about on this call, to ensure that their voices are heard, not just within our organisation, but within our society.
I mean, as someone, obviously, the last time we actually spoke was the day that lockdown got implemented. So I think to have seen how far the Children's Society have come from that day in March to now June, I think it's definitely been incredible to see what your team and all of the members of the Children's Society, volunteers, all the paid workers, are doing just to support young people in this time where they need a lifeline.
I couldn't agree more.
Guys, what? You're both incredible. Well, like, one, you are, Alicia, you are so much better at keeping time than I am. I'm awful. I just ramble on. Whereas with you, literally hitting the mark. Brilliant. It's like we've been doing this non-stop. Like, how many people you've interviewed Mark once before, have you?
I think this is number 3 now.
Number 3, actually.
I think.
Well, it was brilliant, and I would just like to say, like, I think it's really, really important to also like talk about, which you have done, about the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think, as well as we're seeing like a huge amount of white people protesting as well, we're actually seeing a huge amount of young people protesting. And I think that's what is incredible. And I know you kept saying, Alicia, about inventing. I think young people are going to be inventing the future, and so they should be. Not as in it's all down to you guys, but you guys are leading the way, and us people, like us older people, really need to listen to you guys, because one, I feel like your ideas, young people's, are without fear. And I think that's what we need in this new world that we're going to be living in. So I just like to say thank you to you both. You're absolutely incredible. Mark, you flatter us by saying how much you love our team.
I do. That's entirely true.
But we're seeing a lot of charities, a lot of corporations who are coming out and saying, we support young people during this time, we support Black Lives Matter during this time, etc. But it takes a lot of courage to be a white man of privilege to stand up and say, we need to do more. And we do, as a charity, but also to contribute to a wider society. I think we do need to do more. And it's so good that we are recognizing it and learning to educate ourselves. I think I posted in the comments a link about what the Children's Society are saying about it. But I know Oxfam have done an incredible list of ways to educate yourself, who to listen to, etc. So there is help out there for us. And I think it's down to incredible people like you, both of you, to shout out more about it, because you two have got, guys, if you have Twitter, you need to follow them both. You really do. It's great. And you both have an amazing power, but you also have an amazing passion, which I think so many people latch onto. Like, Lizzie, you are going to look at these comments that are coming through, and they're all singing your praises. You're an inspiration.
I haven't looked yet.
There's great work. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for your heartfelt concern. Thank you, Mark. You even had some viewers apparently from America. So you are going global, guys. Well, thank you. I think that's all we've really got time for. But I want to give you both a massive shout out. Thank you so much for coming on. And just thank you for both of us for giving your voice, really. Alicia, you are an inspiration. I think I said to everybody when I said that you were coming on, they were like, you don't have a job anymore, Anna.
I'm someone who really doesn't like the word inspiration. Like, I don't see it. Like, what I do, I just see it as me speaking out. Everyone's like, oh, I see it on Twitter all the time, and like people like Caroline are like, oh, she's like one of those superheroes, and like, you're such an inspiration. I hate it. Like, I don't know what it is. I just don't see it.
I suppose it's just part of your life. Like, you as a young person have lived through things. You're seeing things, and also you've got a fresh eye to things, and you've got this bravery. I think more than anything, you're brave, because not everybody could be a young person anyway. Being a young person is hard, but also fight for other people. And I think that is something that is incredible. And even though you say that you don't like the word, it is something to, you know what, give yourself a pat on the back about, because we're more than.
He was the guest editor of our Children's Society magazine a couple weeks ago, which was fabulous and really good. And yeah, you're a star, absolute star. You can interview me anytime you like. I do this the other way around. I want to be the person interviewing you for a change.
That could be the next one. How about the 20th episode? Mark interviews you, yeah?
I mean, Mark said it a number of times. He's waiting for a time where he can actually interview me for once.
Okay, perfect, guys. We've got it in the diary. We've got it live now. You can't back out. Well, again, thank you both so much. And I will let you get back to however your day is going. And hopefully the weather can brighten up soon. But thank you both. And thank you to everybody who has been watching. Mark, I can see you're about to say something.
18 is the score to beat on the quickfire round at the start.
Yep, don't worry. I will add you to the leaderboard. We have a special episode next week as well, which will be talking to this Disrupting Signals group. So that's going to be a really interesting watch as well. So yeah, from me, thank you. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Alicia. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.